Okay, so today we're going to dive into something that's been making headlines and sparking a whole lot of debate.
Yeah, this is a tricky one.
It's all about Stellantis. For those who maybe aren't as familiar, they own some big name car brands: Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, the gang.
The heavy hitters in the American auto market.
Exactly. And what we're seeing is this sort of collision of corporate decisions, economic policies, and let's just say some very different interpretations of what's going on.
Definitely a lot of spin to unpack.
Yeah, so our jumping off point for all this is an analysis from the Ring of Fire YouTube channel.
Always a fiery take.
They did a reaction video to some comments Kellyanne Conway made about Stellantis and these recent layoffs they've announced in the U.S.
Right, and that's where things get interesting because you've got these layoffs happening, but then there's this whole other layer of how it's being connected to Trump's tariffs and, well, Conway's take on it all.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we want to dig into today. Not about taking sides or anything like that, but trying to understand the core facts and then, all the different ways this is being spun.
Trying to cut through the noise.
Exactly. So let's start with the layoffs themselves. Stellantis announced they're laying off about 900 workers here in the U.S.
That's a big number.
And the company's pretty upfront about it. They're directly blaming these layoffs on the tariffs that were put in place during the Trump administration.
That's a pretty bold statement to make.
And it's important for folks to understand what these tariffs actually are. Basically, they're taxes on imported goods. And the idea behind them, often anyway, is to make American-made products more competitive.
Right, kind of a protectionist measure, but it's not always that simple.
Definitely not, because these tariffs can also end up increasing costs for companies that rely on parts from overseas.
Or if other countries hit back with their own tariffs.
Exactly. So it gets really complicated really fast.
And that complexity, I think, is what we're seeing play out here with Stellantis.
Yeah. So the company's saying these tariffs are hurting them. They're facing higher costs, maybe losing some competitive edge, and so they're having to cut jobs.
It's their justification for these layoffs.
And that's just one piece of the puzzle. Because at the same time as these U.S. layoffs, Stellantis also announced they're pausing production at plants in Canada and Mexico.
Interesting. So not just a U.S. issue.
Right. And this is where Kellyanne Conway's comments come in and where the Ring of Fire analysis really starts to heat up.
Buckle up.
So Conway was on Fox News talking about all this. And according to the YouTube video, she said, and I'm quoting here, "We were seeing some positive reaction today. For all the negative Debbie Downers, look at the positive reactions. Stellantis, which owns Chrysler and Ram and Jeep, they came out today and said they're going to stop producing in Mexico. They're one of the runs of big manufacturers in Mexico. They're going to stop doing that."
Yeah.
They laid off 900 American workers in the United States and only paused production in Mexico.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
A lot. And the first thing that jumps out is how she's describing what's happening in Mexico versus the U.S. She uses the phrase "stop producing" in Mexico, but talks about layoffs in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark difference in language.
And the YouTube host picks up on that right away. They point out that Stellantis only said they were pausing production in Mexico,
Yeah.
not stopping it altogether.
So temporary versus permanent.
And they don't hold back. They're accusing Conway of straight up lying, of twisting the facts to fit a certain narrative.
That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is, and it gets to the heart of the whole spin thing. We're seeing the same events, layoffs in the U.S., production changes in Mexico, but they're being presented in very different ways.
And those different presentations, those different framings can lead people to very different conclusions.
Yeah, so the Ring of Fire host is saying you can't just celebrate or spin job losses in the U.S. as some kind of win, even if the reasoning is something like, well, we're going to stop producing in Mexico now.
They're highlighting that human cost those 900 people losing their jobs.
Yeah, they keep bringing it back to the individuals and families who are being impacted by this.
And that's an important perspective to remember the real world consequences.
Absolutely, because it's easy to get lost in the big picture, the economic theories, the political arguments, but at the end of the day, this is affecting real people's lives.
And that's what the YouTube host is trying to emphasize.
Right, so then the video shifts gears a bit and starts talking about the role of the tariffs themselves.
Kind of zooming out to the bigger picture.
Yeah, and they're very clear about who they blame for these tariffs: Donald Trump and his administration.
They're drawing a direct line between Trump's policies and these job losses.
They even go further and criticize the Republican Party as a whole for not stopping those tariffs from happening.
It's a pretty pointed critique.
And their argument is that these tariffs aren't actually based on any kind of sound economic strategy. that they're more about Trump's own personal agenda.
So it's not just about economics, it's about politics and personalities.
Yeah, and that's where things get really messy, because how do you separate those things?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah, it's tough.
And this whole debate about tariffs is something we see play out again and again. Some people say they're necessary to protect American jobs and industries. Others say they end up hurting more than they help.
Exactly. And this situation with Stellantis is kind of a microcosm of that larger debate.
A case study in how these policies can have unintended consequences.
Yeah, so we've got this really complex picture emerging. We've got Stellantis, a global company, making decisions about where to produce and who to employ. We've got Trump's tariffs, which are meant to protect American jobs, but may actually be leading to job losses. And then we've got people like Kellyanne Conway and the Ring of Fire host offering very different interpretations of what it all means.
And it's important to remember that everyone's coming at this from a particular perspective with their own set of priorities and biases.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening, the big takeaway here is to be critical. Don't just take things at face value. Look at the facts. Look at who's presenting those facts and think about what their agenda might be.
And don't forget about the human impact, those 900 workers who lost their jobs, their families, their communities. Those are the real stakes here.
Exactly. So this whole situation really gets you thinking. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the back and forth, the political spin, the blame game. But what's really going on here? What are the deeper economic forces at play? How do global supply chains work? How do tariffs actually affect companies and workers? It's a big tangled web.
It is, but it's a web we need to try to untangle if we want to make sense of the world around us.
Totally agree. Well, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
And for everyone listening, keep those questions coming, keep digging, and until next time, stay curious.
Stay informed.
And most importantly, stay engaged.
See ya.
Bye, Ann.